Okay, so picture this. It's 1969, the summer of love, right? Woodstock, the moon landing, a time of change, and, this feeling of hope in the air.
Yeah, real turning point.
Exactly.
Right.
But in these quiet college towns in Michigan, Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti,
Oh, yeah.
a totally different story was unfolding. A darkness had settled, and this wave of fear was gripping everyone.
It had actually started a couple of years earlier, around 67.
Right.
Young women started vanishing, seemingly out of nowhere, and their lives were cut tragically short.
And each disappearance just amplified that fear and that sense of dread in
Yeah.
the community, right? Everyone's wondering, who's next?
Absolutely. It was a terrifying time.
So let's get into the victims themselves.
Hmm.
They were young women, mostly students, some
Yeah.
hitchhikers,
Right.
just living their lives. And then their bodies would be found sometimes after rainstorms.
Hmm.
And the violence was just unimaginable. Stripped, mutilated, sexually assaulted.
Yeah, it was a brutal pattern. And what's really striking is how meticulous the crimes were.
Hmm.
The way the bodies were posed, the long dangly earrings.
Yeah, that detail always stood out.
It suggests a very deliberate attempt to create a specific image, almost ritualistic.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
And the killer was like a ghost. Just vanished without a trace. Can you even imagine the fear in those towns? Parents wouldn't let their daughters out alone. Women walking in groups. Hitchhiking became unthinkable.
Oh, I bet, yeah. Every shadow, every stranger could be the monster they were hunting.
Exactly. It was like living in a nightmare. And the police were under immense pressure to catch this predator.
Right, they had to do something. So they launched Operation Babysitter.
Operation Babysitter. What was that?
This huge effort to protect potential victims, patrol the streets, hoping to catch the killer red-handed.
Wow. So they're essentially babysitting an entire community living under this constant threat.
Pretty much.
Can you imagine the tension during those patrols? Every car, every dark corner could be the answer to this horrifying mystery.
It must have been intense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twist and Crime series. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.
We really appreciate your support.
So we left off in the summer of '69. The pressure's on, and the police find another victim on Huron River Drive.
Right. This one was Karen Sue Beineman.
And this was the turning point.
Yeah, the evidence at this scene really cracked the case open. It led them straight to John Norman Collins.
John Norman Collins, a college student at Eastern Michigan.
Yep, a seemingly average guy.
It's always the ones you least suspect, right? You're telling me this guy was behind all of it?
It's chilling, isn't it? This wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. This was a clean-cut young man blending into everyday life. Someone you might pass on the street and never even think twice about.
So how did they connect him to the murder on Huron River Drive? What was this smoking gun?
Well, it started with a trail of bloodstains.
Okay,
Found in the basement of a house, Collins was watching for a family friend.
interesting.
Then a homemade ladder was found nearby, and it matched a description given by, get this, a psychic.
A psychic. Hold on, that's a curveball I wasn't expecting.
I know, right? But there was more to it than just a vision.
I was going to say,
The physical evidence was key, but there was also a witness, a beautician, who placed Collins with a young woman who was later found murdered.
wow. So they had the blood trail, the ladder matching the psychic's vision, and a witness placing him with a victim. That's a lot of coincidences pointing to Collins. What happened next?
They started digging into his life, and what they found was a stark contrast to the clean-cut image he presented.
Like what?
There were whispers of strange behaviors, unnerving comments he made to women, a sort of manipulative charm that seemed to mask something much darker.
What kind of comments are we talking about? Give me an example.
One woman testified that Collins had this bizarre ability to smell when she was menstruating.
Oh, wow.
It's a detail that always stuck with me, this chilling insight into a truly disturbed mind.
That's incredibly disturbing. It makes you wonder what else was going on beneath the surface. Did they ever explore the psychological significance of that? They did, but, the science of profiling was still pretty new back then.
It's a shame because understanding the why behind these crimes is just as important as catching the perpetrator.
I agree. So they had Collins in their sights with a mountain of evidence against him. What happened next?
Well, the case went to trial, and it became a national sensation.
Of course.
The media dubbed it the Michigan Murders, and the whole country was captivated by the story of this seemingly ordinary college student accused of such monstrous acts.
I can only imagine the frenzy surrounding that courtroom. The families of the victims desperate for answers, the public demanding justice. What was the defense's strategy?
Collins's defense team tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance.
Okay.
They argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that the prosecution couldn't definitively prove he was guilty. They portrayed him as this young man with a bright future, wrongfully accused, caught in a web he didn't weave.
And the prosecution?
They presented a very different picture. They meticulously laid out the evidence connecting the dots between Collins and each victim, highlighting the similarities in the crimes and the chilling details that point to a single perpetrator. They argued that the evidence, while circumstantial, painted a clear and undeniable picture of his guilt.
So what did the jury decide?
After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found John Norman Collins guilty of the murder of Karen Sue Beineman.
Wow.
He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Justice for at least one of the victims. But what about the other 6 women? Was he ever officially connected to those murders?
That's where things get a bit complicated. You see, he was only ever tried and convicted for Karen Sue Beineman's murder, but many believe Collins was responsible for all 7 killings.
Why is that?
The modus operandi, the victim profiles, the locations, it all lined up. But they just didn't have enough evidence to charge him for the others back then.
What about later, with all the advancements in forensic technology?
Well, years later, DNA technology caught up. And they were able to confirm Collins's involvement in some of the other cases.
Really?
Yeah, it was a bittersweet victory confirmation long after the fact. But at least it brought some sense of closure to those families who had waited decades for answers.
It's heartbreaking to think about those families living with the uncertainty, the not knowing for all those years. It's a testament to the persistence of law enforcement never giving up on these cases, even when the trail goes cold.
It really is. It also makes you wonder how many other cases out there could be solved with these advancements in DNA technology. It's a glimmer of hope in the darkness.
Yeah, a reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, can eventually prevail. So we know he did it. But did they ever figure out why? Why did Collins commit these horrific crimes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The big mystery. Unfortunately, Collins never confessed.
Oh, really?
Nope. And he always maintained his innocence.
So frustrating.
Totally. Without his cooperation, investigators had to try to piece together a psychological profile.
Right. Working with what little they had.
Exactly.
It's like staring into this abyss, trying to understand something that's just beyond comprehension.
It is. And it really highlights those complexities of human behavior. The darkness that can hide beneath the surface of what seems totally normal.
It makes you question everything you think you know about people. But aside from the motive, there's another question that's been on my mind. Were there potentially more victims out there? Victims who were never connected to Collins' cases that are still unsolved?
That's a haunting thought. And it's definitely a possibility. There were several unsolved murders from that same time period that shared a lot of similarities with the Michigan murders. The victims, the methods, the locations, it all lined up.
So even though Collins was convicted for one murder and linked to others through DNA, there's a chance his reign of terror was even greater than we know.
It's possible.
That's a heavy burden for those families still searching for answers, still grappling with the loss of their loved ones, not knowing for sure.
Absolutely. And it speaks to those ripple effects these crimes have. You know, they impact not just the immediate victims, but entire communities.
Of course.
Leaving behind scars that may never fully heal, the fear, the mistrust, the lingering sense of vulnerability, it's a heavy price to pay.
The Michigan murders are such a chilling reminder of that darkness that can exist within seemingly ordinary people.
Yeah.
A darkness that can erupt with just devastating consequences.
Absolutely.
It's a lesson in vigilance, in trusting our instincts, and in never taking our safety for granted.
And it underscores the importance of constant vigilance within our justice system.
Right.
Advancements in forensic technology like DNA analysis, they're crucial for solving these cold cases and bringing closure to families who have waited years, sometimes decades, for answers.
The Michigan murders left such a mark on those communities, Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. It forced people to confront that fragility of life, the vulnerability that exists even in the places that seem safe and idyllic.
And the case still resonates today. It's a reminder that the monsters in our nightmares can be all too real.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Michigan murders. It's a case that really makes us confront some uncomfortable truths about human nature and the lasting power of fear.
Definitely.
But it also shows the resilience of communities, the unwavering pursuit of justice, and that hope that even in the darkest of times, the truth will come to light.
That's the thing to remember.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into fascinating and often unsettling true crime stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.